Which brings us to the second portion of the lesson today. This is a quote from a Native American. It says, "You and the French are like the two edges of a pair of shears, and we are the cloth which is to be cut to pieces between them." Think about what this means. Push pause, 30 seconds. Think about it, and then we'll get on with this. So, when you look at this one overall, it's trying to get the picture here is each sharp edge of the scissors. One is the French, one is the British, and as they fight and as they're clashing, what's getting cut in the middle? Well, that's the Native Americans. Why is that? Because think about this. The French and the British, they're fighting over land, correct? Whose land is it really? Oh, that's right. The Native Americans had been here for a long, long, long time prior to any of these Europeans coming. So it's almost like you have two friends that are fighting over your stuff. Sounds like a weird situation, but nonetheless, that is what it was to the Native Americans. So our target for this section. I can explain why Native Americans were in a bad situation at the beginning of the French and Indian War. Now, you may have heard this saying before, being stuck between a rock and a hard place. The Simpsons, I think they had a really good visual of this in the Simpsons movie, where you have Homer Simpson getting slammed between a rock and a hard place, and yeah, in other words, you're stuck in. Yeah, it's two different things, but both of them are going to be very difficult to escape, and neither of them are very comfortable, right? So, the Native Americans, think about it for them. No matter who wins, they're going to lose their area, or their land, because both had planned to control the area. Now, you had two options. The first option that Native Americans had was to stay out of the war and not help either the French or the British. There are some problems with this. You may have heard this saying before, you're either with us or against us. So theoretically, you know somebody's going to win the war, right? And they might take that approach and say, hey, you didn't help us, therefore you're our enemy. So sometimes people say, or people would look at this from the perspective of your non-involvement in not getting involved implies that you're against that side or just against the war in total. And what happens at the end of wars? Well, to the victor goes the spoils. In other words, the person who wins the war, they get benefits from it, because the reality is you're not going to fight in a war if you don't think there's a positive end gain, right? So imagine you're Britain, you win the war, you're expecting that you're going to be able to use the land, right? Same thing would hold true for France. So this whole idea of staying out of it, it's not really a great choice because, well, no matter what, it's kind of like you're losing. So then on the other end, you're going to say, okay, then you have to pick a side, right? And we could say pick your poison because, well, neither one's great for the Native Americans. So why might you pick one side versus the other? Well, let's think about the French. The French accepted natives for the most part, and there are a lot of marriages between French and natives. And the French also didn't disturb the natives as much because their style of living was not this total colony type of approach. This is a huge difference between France and England in America. France has people over here just for economic gain. It's smaller numbers of people, way smaller. It's just like little small trading villages in comparison with whole total colonies where everybody's moving over here permanently. So they didn't disturb the natives as much, and they didn't disturb the land as much. That might make the French a little bit better choice. The English, on the other hand, they offered lower trade prices for the natives. So in terms of economics and dealing with the natives, they were pretty good. So I think that a lot of us agree that cheaper is better. And the English were very implanted in America. There were a lot of people here. So you might think to yourself, well, we can't get rid of the English, right? The French, there aren't that many of them. Maybe they can leave. The English, we're going to have a hard time getting them out here just because of the numbers and the fact that they do have permanent settlements here. So maybe we should side with the English. It's kind of like, imagine that Pitt and West Virginia in the past, and I can't say this anymore, they don't play football anymore, but imagine they're about to play a football game, and you're going to a party where you have to wear the clothing of only one side. Now, many of you right now are going to say, I'm going to side with Pitt because I don't like West Virginia. Now let's imagine this other thing gets added in there. Those wearing the clothes of a winner get $50. So we could say if you're on the side who's going to win, you get $50. So really this year I'd say Pitt might be better than West Virginia, so I might wear Pitt myself. But let's imagine that West Virginia is a better team, but you like Pitt better. Which one are you going to side with? Kind of a tough decision. So, I would say I'd side with West Virginia and Pitt's going down, but that's just me. Now, who do the natives actually support in this war, given that really many tribes are going to get involved because of that whole idea of, if you don't get involved, it seems like you're against everybody. France gains the most, especially early on. Britain tried to gain the support, especially of the Iroquois nation, and eventually they will get it, but early on they cannot, and that's going to really hurt them in this war for quite a while. Because the Iroquois' perspective was, look, they're quarreling or they're arguing about lands which belong to us. It's that same idea I brought up at the beginning. Two groups fighting over somebody else's stuff. Sounds really weird, right? So for them, they're going to stick out of this as long as they possibly can. And this quote, I think, fits very well. Such a quarrel as this may end in our destruction. The natives, a lot of them saw the writing was on the wall that this was going to end badly for them. And if you look at American history, to be quite honest with you, it does end pretty poorly for Native Americans, unfortunately. So, the majority are going to side with France. The end result of this section. French got the most native help due to better relations and it provided them with a major advantage in the war. And Britain needed to find a way to get more help because they didn't understand how to fight here. And we're going to talk about that here soon. Wait till you see the first battle. George Washington nearly dies, which is crazy, and they bring over their best general from Europe, and he gets crushed because he's not ready for this. And really, why is that? Because it's different soil, different turf, different fighting style, and the Native Americans, they knew what they were doing. So Britain needs to try to find some more native support, and they need to get their colonists involved because that's going to really help them if they could. The real challenge we're going to see is the colonists, they don't really work together yet. They're really more just for themselves. And especially in the beginning, this is going to be very difficult for Britain. It's new ground, new strategies, a lot of change. So, to wrap up the lesson here, do some target practice. First, explain how England and France came into conflict in America. So write down a couple ideas with that. Second, identify the key ideas associated with the event that sparked the French-Indian War. So really, what is the sparking event? So we know really the general idea of conflict between England and France. Now let's get into what specifically started the fighting, because you need some sort of inciting action. And third, explain why the Native Americans were in a bad situation at the beginning of the French and Indian War. And make that a 2-sentence minimum for that answer. Okay? Do those, and you're good to go for this lesson. Hopefully that was clear.